In the late 1944, during the final days of World War II, a group of German researchers conducted a daring experiment. They used a gas-based stimulant to keep 5 people awake for 15 days. They were kept in a sealed environment to accurately monitor their oxygen intake, as the gas could be lethal in high concentrations. This was a time before surveillance cameras, so they only used microphones and 5-inch thick small windows to observe them. The room was fully equipped with books and beds, but no bedding, running water, a toilet, and enough dried food for all 5 for over a month. The test subjects were political prisoners, considered enemies of the state during World War II. Everything was fine for the first 5 days. The subjects hardly complained, as they were promised, falsely, that they would be freed if they agreed to the experiment and did not sleep for 30 days. Their conversations and activities were monitored, and it was noted that they continued to talk about increasingly traumatic events in their past. The general tone of their conversations became darker after the 4th day. After 5 days, they started to complain about the circumstances and events that lead them to where they were and began to demonstrate severe paranoia. They stopped talking to each other and began whispering into the microphones and one-way windows. Oddly, they all seemed to think that they could win the trust of the experimenters by turning against their comrades, the other subjects imprisoned with them. At first, the researchers suspected this was an effect of the gas itself. After 9 days, the first of them started screaming. He ran the length of the room, screaming at the top of his lungs for 3 hours straight, after which he continued trying to scream, but could only produce occasional squeaks. The researchers hypothesized that he had torn his vocal cords. The most surprising thing about this behavior was how the other prisoners reacted to it, or rather, didn't react at all. They continued whispering into the microphones until the second of the prisoners started to scream. The 2 non-screaming prisoners took the books apart, smeared their own feces on each page, and pasted them calmly over the glass windows. The screaming promptly stopped. So did the whispering into the microphones. After 3 more days passed, the researchers checked the microphones hourly to ensure they were working, since they thought it impossible that no sound could be occurring with 5 people inside. The oxygen consumption in the room indicated that all 5 must still be alive. In fact, it was the amount of oxygen 5 people would consume at a very heavy level of strenuous exercise. The lungs through the rib cage. All the blood vessels and organs remained intact, but had been taken out and laid on the floor, fanning out around the eviscerated but still living bodies of the subjects. The digestive tract of all 4 could be seen to be working, digesting food. It quickly became apparent that what they were digesting was their own flesh that they had ripped off and eaten over the course of days. Most of the soldiers were German special operatives at the facility, but still many refused to return to the room to remove the test subjects. The subjects themselves continued to scream to be left in the room and begged and demanded that the gas be turned back on, lest they fall asleep. The exact reasons why the test subjects began to harm themselves in such horrific ways are unknown. However, it's believed that the extreme sleep deprivation, coupled with the effects of the gas, led to severe psychological trauma. This trauma may have resulted in hallucinations, paranoia, and a complete breakdown of their sense of self-preservation. The subjects may have been attempting to stay awake out of fear of what would happen if they fell asleep. Their self-mutilation could have been an extreme method of keeping themselves awake. It's also possible that the gas had such a profound effect on their minds that they no longer recognized or felt any connection to their own bodies, leading them to harm themselves without fully comprehending the consequences. Furthermore, the isolation and stress of the experiment could have led to a type of group psychosis where the behavior of one individual can influence the others. This could explain why all the subjects began to exhibit similar behaviors. In any case, the exact reasons for their actions remain a mystery, as the subjects were unable to provide coherent explanations for their behavior, and the researchers could only speculate based on their observations. During World War II, the Nazis conducted a number of horrifying human experiments. These were conducted in concentration camps and other facilities, often under the guise of medical research. Here are a few of the most infamous. Twin experiments. These were conducted by Josef Mengele at Auschwitz. He was particularly interested in identical twins. His experiments included attempts to artificially create conjoined twins, injecting chemicals into children's eyes in an attempt to change their color, and countless brutal surgeries performed without anesthesia. High-altitude experiments. These were conducted at Dachau concentration camp, where prisoners were subjected to high-altitude conditions to test the limits of human endurance and existence at extremely high altitudes. The victims were placed in a low-pressure chamber, and the atmospheric pressure was then lowered to a level equivalent to that found at over 68,000 feet. The experiments often resulted in death. Hypothermia experiments, also conducted at Dachau. These experiments were designed to investigate the most effective means of treating hypothermia. Victims were forced to remain in a tank of ice water for up to 3 hours. Approximately 100 people are thought to have died during these experiments. Seawater experiments. Conducted in Dachau, these experiments were designed to study various methods of making seawater drinkable. The victims were deprived of all food and only given chemically processed seawater to drink, resulting in severe dehydration and organ failure. Sterilization experiments. The Nazis conducted sterilization experiments in an attempt to develop a method of sterilization that could be conducted without the knowledge of the person being sterilized. This was part of their plan for racial purification. These are just a few examples of the horrifying experiments conducted by the Nazis during World War II. The full extent of their atrocities is far greater and serves as a grim reminder of the depths of inhumanity that can be reached in the name of ideology and pseudoscience. The soldiers finally managed to get the 4 surviving subjects out of the room. They fought fiercely, as if desperate to stay in the room filled with the gas that had driven them to madness. One of the subjects ripped a soldier's throat out with his teeth before they could restrain him. Another was shot multiple times after he broke free of his restraints and lunged at another soldier. The remaining 2 subjects were restrained and moved to a medical facility. The doctors had hoped to perform surgery to repair the damage they had inflicted upon themselves, but it quickly became clear that this would be impossible. The subjects refused to be sedated, and their bodies had somehow become incredibly resistant to the anesthetics. They continued to scream to be returned to the room and for the gas to be turned back on. In the end, the subjects had to be placed in a secure facility, restrained and under constant supervision. The remaining test subjects died in quite horrific conditions. They had self-inflicted gruesome injuries, and despite being tightly restrained and under constant supervision, they continued to harm themselves. Their bodies had become incredibly tolerant to pain, to the point where anesthetics no longer had any effect. They refused any medical assistance and continued to call to be returned to the experiment room and for the gas to be turned back on. In the end, they slowly died from the wounds they had inflicted upon themselves. Some died from blood loss, while others from infections or overall health deterioration. The final scene was a horrific image of madness and cruelty, a costly lesson on the consequences of human experimentation without strict ethical control. The atrocities committed by Nazi Germany during World War II are some of the darkest moments in human history. Millions of innocent people, primarily Jews, were systematically exterminated in the Holocaust. Others were subjected to brutal medical experiments, forced labor, and other forms of inhumane treatment. Nazi Germany also initiated a devastating war that resulted in the death of millions more and widespread destruction across Europe. Their ideology of racial superiority and their disregard for human life led to unimaginable suffering and loss. The end of Nazi Germany came with the conclusion of World War II in 1945. The Allied forces, comprised of the United States, the Soviet Union, the United Kingdom, and others, defeated Germany. Adolf Hitler, the leader of Nazi Germany, died by suicide in his bunker in Berlin as Allied forces closed in. In the aftermath, the Nuremberg trials were held to bring those responsible for the atrocities to justice. Many high-ranking Nazi officials were convicted of war crimes and crimes against humanity, and several were sentenced to death. However, the end of Nazi Germany did not erase the horrors they had inflicted. The memory of their atrocities serves as a stark reminder of the depths of inhumanity that can be reached when power is wielded without regard for human life and dignity. It's a reminder of the importance of standing up against hate, discrimination, and tyranny in all its forms. And so the chilling tale of Nazi Germany's horrifying crimes and their grim end draws to a close. It serves as a stark reminder of the depths of darkness humanity can descend into and the importance of vigilance against such atrocities. But the night is full of terrors, and there are more spine-chilling tales waiting to be unveiled. I invite you to join me as we delve deeper into the shadows, unearthing stories that will make your blood run cold and send shivers down your spine. Stay tuned for more terrifying tales that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Until then, remember, not all monsters lurk in the dark.